Once there was a man named John who lived a life filled with sin and wickedness. He was selfish, cruel, and didn't care about anyone but himself. One day, he died in a car accident, and his soul was sent straight to hell. As soon as John arrived in hell, he felt the unbearable heat and saw the flames of fire all around him. He was terrified and begged for mercy, but there was none to be found in this place. As he wandered through the fiery landscape, he heard the sound of cannibals chanting and devouring human flesh. The sound sent shivers down John's spine, and he realized he was not alone. He turned around and saw a group of cannibals approaching him, their eyes filled with hunger and malice. They started to chase him, and he ran as fast as he could, but they were faster and caught up with him. John tried to fight them off, but there were too many of them, and he soon found himself overpowered. They tied him up and carried him to their camp, where they started to prepare him for dinner. They cut off his limbs one by one and roasted them over the fire, while John screamed in agony. The cannibals continued to feast on John's flesh, and he realized that this was his eternal punishment for his sins. He begged for forgiveness, but it was too late. The cannibals devoured every last inch of his body until there was nothing left but bones. John's screams echoed through hell, and the cannibals continued to feast on the souls of sinners like him for all eternity. It was a fate worse than death, and one that John could never escape. As the cannibals finished devouring John's body, they discarded his remains into a pile of bones. However, something strange began to happen. John's soul remained in hell, and he felt a burning desire to seek revenge on those who had eaten him. Desperate to escape his gruesome fate, John devised a plan. He waited until the cannibals were asleep and crept towards their camp. He used his newfound powers as a spirit to possess the body of one of the cannibals. Using his host's skills, John began to skin the bodies of other sinners who had been sent to hell. He sewed the skins together to create a grotesque suit, which he wore as a disguise to blend in with the cannibals. The cannibals never suspected that their prey had returned in a different form, and John began to plot his revenge. He waited for the right moment, and when the cannibals were least expecting it, he struck. John slaughtered the cannibals one by one, his fury and desire for revenge giving him the strength he needed to overpower them. He tore them apart with his bare hands and devoured their flesh, his hatred growing stronger with each passing moment. As he basked in the bloody aftermath of his vengeance, John realized that he had become something far worse than the cannibals he had killed. He had become a monster, consumed by his own anger and hatred. But it was too late to turn back. John had made his choice, and he would continue to roam the fiery landscape of hell, seeking out sinners to devour and adding to his human skin suit. His once human soul had been consumed by darkness, and there was no going back. As John wandered the fiery landscape of hell, his human skin suit began to decay and lose its effectiveness. He needed a new form of protection, and that's when he had a twisted idea. He remembered the pile of bones where his own remains had been discarded, and he realized that he could fashion them into a suit of armor. Using his powers as a spirit, John began to manipulate the bones and shape them into a crude suit of armor. The process was painful and gruesome, but John was consumed by his desire for power and revenge. He worked tirelessly, collecting bones from other sinners who had been discarded in the pile, and using them to reinforce his armor. With his new bone armor, John became even more fearsome than before. He was invulnerable to the attacks of other creatures in hell, and his strength was unmatched. He continued to roam the landscape, seeking out sinners to devour and adding to his armor as he went. But as time passed, John realized that he was no longer human. His body had become twisted and contorted, his once human soul consumed by darkness. He had become a monster, feared and reviled by all who encountered him. And so, John continued to wander the fiery landscape of hell, his armor clattering as he walked, a constant reminder of the gruesome fate that awaited all who dared to sin. He was a symbol of the consequences of wickedness, and a warning to all who entered this eternal damnation. As John wandered the fiery landscape of hell, his human skin suit began to decay and lose its effectiveness. He needed a new form of protection, and that's when he had a twisted idea. He remembered the pile of bones where his own remains had been discarded, and he realized that he could fashion them into a suit of armor. Using his powers as a spirit, John began to manipulate the bones and shape them into a crude suit of armor. The process was painful and gruesome, but John was consumed by his desire for power and revenge. He worked tirelessly, collecting bones from other sinners who had been discarded in the pile, and using them to reinforce his armor. With his new bone armor, John became even more fearsome than before. He was invulnerable to the attacks of other creatures in hell, and his strength was unmatched. He continued to roam the landscape, seeking out sinners to devour and adding to his armor as he went. But as time passed, John realized that he was no longer human. His body had become twisted and contorted, his once human soul consumed by darkness. He had become a monster, feared and reviled by all who encountered him. And so, John continued to wander the fiery landscape of hell, his armor clattering as he walked, a constant reminder of the gruesome fate that awaited all who dared to sin. He was a symbol of the consequences of wickedness, and a warning to all who entered this eternal damnation. As John stood there, soulless and vulnerable, the demons seized the opportunity to attack him. They tore into his flesh with claws and fangs, delighting in the sight of his agony. But even as he suffered, John felt a strange sense of liberation. For the first time in a long while, he was free from the darkness that had consumed him. He was no longer driven by a burning desire for revenge, or consumed by a thirst for power. He was simply himself, and in that moment, it was enough. As the demons devoured what remained of his physical form, John's soul was released from its prison. It floated upwards, towards the light that shone in the distance. For a moment, he hesitated, wondering if he deserved to be forgiven for all the atrocities he had committed in his time in hell. But as he drew closer to the light, he felt a sense of peace and acceptance wash over him. He realized that he had been given a second chance, and he vowed to make the most of it. As his soul was welcomed into the embrace of the afterlife, John knew that he had finally found redemption. Though he would never forget the horrors he had witnessed in hell, he could finally move past them, and begin the journey towards a new life, free from the darkness that had once consumed him. As John's soul continued towards the light, he felt a sense of weightlessness and serenity wash over him. He had never felt such a profound sense of peace before, and it filled him with hope and joy. As he approached the light, he realized that he was not alone. A figure was waiting for him, bathed in the gentle glow of the divine light. As John drew closer, he recognized the figure as an angel, radiant and beautiful beyond words. The angel smiled warmly at John, and welcomed him into the embrace of the divine. John felt a sense of awe and wonder wash over him, as he gazed upon the beauty and majesty of the divine realm. For what seemed like an eternity, John wandered the heavenly realms, basking in the warmth and love of the divine. He felt his soul begin to heal, as he shed the darkness and bitterness that had plagued him for so long. In time, John knew that he would be reborn, given a new life and a new chance to make the world a better place. But for now, he was content to simply bask in the radiance of the divine, and be at peace. And so John's soul remained in the divine realm, at peace and at rest, for all eternity. As John's soul basked in the radiance of the divine, he felt a sense of purpose and fulfillment begin to grow within him. He knew that he had been given a second chance for a reason, and that he had a duty to make the most of it. And so he began to explore the heavenly realms, seeking out others who had found redemption and peace. He listened to their stories, and shared his own, and together they found solace and comfort in each other's company. As time passed, John's soul began to transform. The darkness and bitterness that had once consumed him were replaced by a deep sense of compassion and empathy for others. He realized that his experiences in hell had given him a unique perspective on the nature of suffering and redemption, and he felt a calling to use that knowledge to help others find their own way towards the divine. And so John's soul became a guide and mentor to others, sharing his wisdom and compassion with those who needed it most. He journeyed across the heavenly realms, offering hope and healing to those who had been scarred by the trials of life. In time, John knew that he would be reborn into a new life, a life that would be marked by love and service to others. But for now, he was content to be a source of light and hope in the divine realm, a beacon of compassion and understanding for all who sought it. And so John's soul remained in the heavenly realms, at peace and at rest, for all eternity. As John's soul continued to grow and evolve in the divine realm, he began to feel a sense of restlessness. He knew that he had found peace and purpose in his new existence, but he couldn't shake the feeling that there was still more he could do to help others. And then, one day, he heard a faint whisper in the back of his mind. It was a voice he recognized all too well, the voice of the darkness that had once consumed him. At first, John tried to ignore the voice, but it grew louder and more insistent with each passing day. It whispered to him of the suffering and pain that still existed in the mortal world, and urged him to use his newfound wisdom and compassion to help those who were still trapped in the darkness. As John listened to the voice, he realized that it was not a call to return to his old ways, but rather a call to bring the light of the divine into the world of mortals. And so he made a decision: he would willingly leave the heavenly realms, and return to the mortal world to serve as a guide and mentor to those who were still lost in the darkness. With a sense of purpose and determination, John's soul left the heavenly realms and descended back into the mortal world. He knew that the journey ahead would be difficult, and that there would be many challenges and obstacles to overcome, but he was ready to face them all. As he entered the mortal realm once again, John could feel the weight of the darkness pressing in on him. But he knew that he was not alone. The divine light still burned brightly within him, and he would use that light to guide him through the trials ahead. And so John began his new journey, a journey that would be marked by love, compassion, and a deep sense of purpose. He knew that it would not be easy, but he was ready to face whatever lay ahead, knowing that he had been given a second chance for a reason. As John walked through the mortal world, he saw the suffering and pain that still existed. But he also saw the glimmers of hope and light that shone through the darkness. And he knew that it was his duty to help those who were still lost in the shadows to find their way towards the light. He began by seeking out those who were most in need, the homeless, the sick, the lost and the forgotten. He listened to their stories, and shared his own, offering them comfort and hope in their darkest moments. Over time, word of John's kindness and compassion began to spread, and people from all walks of life began to seek him out. They came to him with their problems and their pain, and he listened to them all, offering guidance and support with a gentle and loving hand. And in time, John's work began to bear fruit. The people he had helped began to find their way towards the light, shedding the darkness and bitterness that had once consumed them. And as they did, they began to spread the light to others, creating a chain reaction of healing and redemption that spread throughout the world. As the years passed, John's work continued. He never lost sight of his purpose, and he remained true to the light that had guided him through the darkest moments of his existence. And though he faced many challenges and setbacks along the way, he never wavered, knowing that he had been given a second chance for a reason. And so John's soul continued to shine brightly, a beacon of hope and compassion for all who sought it. And though he would eventually pass on from this mortal world, his legacy would live on, a testament to the power of redemption and the enduring strength of the human spirit. Just as John's soul continued to shine brightly, a dark shadow began to creep into the world. It was a shadow that John had not seen before, one that was darker and more malevolent than anything he had ever encountered. As he looked out into the world, John could see the shadow growing, spreading its tendrils into the hearts and minds of those around him. And he knew that he had to act fast, before it was too late. With a sense of urgency and determination, John set out to confront the darkness, knowing that the fate of the world hung in the balance. And as he faced down the shadow, he knew that this would be his greatest challenge yet, one that would test him to the very limits of his soul. But what happened next, no one knows for sure. Some say that John was able to vanquish the darkness, saving the world from its malevolent grip. Others say that he was consumed by the darkness, his soul falling back into the shadows from which it had once emerged. And so the fate of John's soul remains a mystery, a tale told in hushed whispers around campfires and in the darkest corners of the world. But one thing is certain, his legacy lives on, a reminder of the enduring power of love, compassion, and redemption in a world that is all too often consumed by darkness.